What we really want to do as enterprise architects is create better business value. I'm more interested in that, and I'm more interested in outcomes than I am in mechanics. Outcomes are very important, and part of the answer to the question that we are trying to address here today of how does EA get engaged in the agile world and in digital products is to pick up some things that are mentioned in TOGAF, but we kind of lose sight of them when we get into the mechanics, which are outcomes. TOGAF talks about architecture governance, including the job of governing the existing architecture landscape, being aware of whether the thing that you thought you were going to do and the value that you thought you were going to get is actually happening, and driving that back into the ADM cycles of the future. But what we really talk about most of the time is how do I do an architecture project? And that's interesting, but it's not enough, and that, I believe, is where a lot of the disconnect comes from.
I am a digital product manager. My product exists purely in the digital space. There's no physicality at all to the product that I manage day to day. And I'm here to talk a little about how, of course, we created this notion of a digital product, and then we're starting to, as a company, ServiceNow, we provide these digital products in the cloud most of the time to our customers. So everything I do is purely digital, and we are, of course, in my team, already product-centric. But there's a lot of other teams that aren't.
We met when I was at Walmart, and Mark introduced me to IT4IT and brought me into this open group thing. And I've been stuck in it for a while now, and I like it quite a lot. But to me, the important thing is not, as I said, process, it's outcome.
That's right.
And if you can get aligned with that as an EA, I think you'll have a lot more to talk about with the agile teams. So this particular point here, and this is for EAs who maybe know TOGAF and understand the ADM, but who may not know much about IT4IT, this is a great explanation of what is a reference architecture, and it describes exactly what IT4IT is. It's a collection of functions, something about their relationship, something about their interfaces, and it's defined at different levels of abstraction. And for all the applications that interest me the most, it is a business architecture for how to do technology in a product-centric world. It started off as a solution to the problem that a large oil company in the Netherlands was having with not being able to connect their ITSM tools together very nicely, even though they all had the same badge on them. And that was the beginning, but we've gone a long way past that. One of the first applications for this was to create things like this heat map. This is from an HP software piece of work. It's been sanitized probably about 7 years ago now. You know about this picture.
Well, and this one is, I think, part of the one of the guides we created for applying IT4IT in a rationalization exercise.
There is a guide there.
Yeah.
That's the first most interesting, obvious use case for this. I used it in that way at Walmart, and it was very effective. HP would go out and do these engagements with their customers, and when I was told this, I didn't believe it, but actually it's true. You'd find like 4,000 or 5,000 individual licensed software products are actually in production.
Yes.
It's like, how can you possibly do that?
And sometimes hundreds of them in one block.
So if you don't do anything else with IT4IT, if you're doing APM and you're talking about your tools landscape, you should be using this. But that's not the only thing that you can use it for. In TOGAF terms, IT4IT is a common systems architecture. It applies across the world to every kind of organization that makes technology things, and it is a minimum viable set of architecture building blocks, which are called functional components, which I would describe in business architecture term as business functions. Mm-hmm. The data objects, which are the circles, are these readable? Kind of. The data objects represent business information. That's what this is a picture of, and the lines represent the minimum viable system of record integrations in this picture. And what IT4IT is saying is if you have all of this working at a certain level, you will be able to not only manage this set of functions well, you will get traceability from end to end. You will no longer have the service desk people running around saying, God, what's going to happen when the server goes down? Who is it? I've been in a meeting helping the infrastructure team in a large company where they had to get rid of 400 Windows 2000 servers because security said it's time to drop the boom on this. And they were terrified because they had no idea what those servers were doing.
It's the scream test again.
That
right?
was my suggestion. I said, well, unplug the network cable, you'll find out pretty quickly. They didn't like that.
No.
They eventually did an archaeology project and figured it out. But you would not have to do that if you use this approach.
No.
This is a picture of the value streams in IT4IT version 3, which is on the verge of release. And as has been mentioned, this is all public because of snapshots we published. This article here by Lars, who spoke earlier, explains in some detail how you can use this model as the basis for understanding how to not just do safe type of work, but scale it up. And that's the real key to this, scale it up.
Automate those jobs.
Automate those jobs and have a consistent way of working. I've done consulting work in which we're looking at using IT4IT as a template to say, well, how are you doing this? And, well, this team does things this way. This team does things that way. So every team is using different tools, different approaches. The agile developers are not recording any design decisions they make because they have godlike vision of the future, so it's not needed. And companies now, this is what I'm getting from people I talk to, are beginning to understand the level of technical debt that is being created by that kind of behavior. As Lars mentioned earlier, IT4IT will help you get rid of that. Another important use of IT4IT as a reference architecture is for the service brokering problem. There's another guide, Service Brokering with the IT4IT standard, started off as a project to say, how can we be a cloud broker? That was an interesting question when that was written, and they very quickly realized, actually, the service broker is the answer. This slide is from a presentation done at an open group conference about 4 years ago from SKF, which is a ball bearing manufacturer in Scandinavia. And they experienced digital disruption when ball bearings suddenly became digital products. They became part of the Internet of Things. So instead of waiting until your $10,000 industrial ball bearing reaches its predicted life and you replace it, now it tells you, I'm starting to die, saves a lot of money. If you can't do that, you go out of business. They redesigned their business and the way that they thought about their own IT department to deal with that disruption. If you dig into the IT4IT standard, you will find that there are about 430, what do we call them?
Functional criteria.
Functional criteria that describe in detail the data flows, the system of record integrations, and things like that that are needed to understand whether you are actually doing all the things that you need to do to make this model work. It's been proven. One of the problems with this is that it's an open group standard, which means that I can use this heavily and make a significant improvement to my business and nobody will ever know.
Yes.
So they say, well, who's using this? Somebody asked earlier, who's using this in government? Well, I can tell you this is being used in some defense industries that you certainly have heard of, and you may even have ridden in one of their vehicles. I did on Saturday night, but they have no reason to tell anybody what they're doing, and they don't. This is more in use than you might think.
Absolutely.
To me, coming from a strategic planning and a management perspective, the most important thing about this is on this slide. How do you decide how to invest in IT? In a traditional large company, you have an IT spend every year of hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars, and about 4% of that is up for grabs.
Discretionary, we called it.
Discretionary. The rest of it is in the keep the lights on bucket. Well, that's already spent, so we won't talk about that. How do you make the decision? Well, I would say politics and fantasy is how you decide how to spend those precious discretionary dollars. It is very traditional human behavior. It is not efficient. When I talk to people about TOGAF, and I'm teaching people what TOGAF is about, and IT4IT, one of the training points is architecture is about money. Randy Hafner, one of the great Forrester architects, told me, well, he said in a presentation, you could use any metric you like when you're doing architecture work, as long as it's dollars. Because when you roll these things up to the top, have you been in a boardroom? Do you listen to what they talk about? They don't talk about architecture goodness. They talk about earnings per share. They talk about money. Even in the public sector, they talk about financial outcomes first, and that's what people are interested in the boardroom. If we can flip the way that we make those decisions from being a big fight about a small amount of money to a discussion about a portfolio of products that we're managing, technology products, and allocate most of that keep the lights on spend at a granular way to those product portfolios, the investment decision becomes very different.
Okay.
This is the key thing that makes the product orientation important. If your investment model is about which projects shall we do, how should we divide up that 4% of the total IT spend into projects and prioritize them, you're never going to get out of the hole. You will always be a cost center, and your attempt to do architecture work, your attempt to make sensible recommendations so that people can make the right decisions is always going to be a struggle, uphill, and often not successful. So this is why I like IT4IT, because it allows us to stop thinking about which project should I do and start thinking about what are our products, which ones are most important, and the mechanism is in the model to look not just at cost. And everyone's worried about, well, how much does this application cost? If IT4IT is fully implemented, we can also say, and how much revenue do we want to ascribe to Mark's subscription, to his instance of that application? Roll it all up, and you're a product manager with a profit and loss account, not just somebody spending lots of money and throwing it down a hole. This is why I like this and why it's important. And when people see that and grab it and go with it, it makes a lot of difference. And that's exactly what they expect from you as an enterprise architect, is to help the company make better financial decisions about technology. So that's my angle on it. Now, when we do that, and we say we're going to focus on digital product management instead of project portfolios, we then start to create a new capability, a new competency, a new role, which pulls all these other things together into a different way of energizing the business. And enterprise architecture should be right in the middle of that. And in the IT4IT model, EA is described. EA artifacts are there that are used to inform and support the digital product portfolio management process.
And that's what the digital factory basically is. IT4IT describes that digital factory.
It is. Yeah. It is the wiring diagram for the digital factory.
Yes. Now we're going to talk about digital products, and we're going to expand your maybe initial understanding and definition of what a digital product is a little bit. And it starts with my product. My product is not sold to end customers. I don't get paid for my product. But it's critically important to every one of ServiceNow's customers. But I know who my customers are internally, and I do know through them who my external customers are. And the whole definition of a digital product came about one day. I visited a book publisher very much like Van Haren, and they said, you know what, we have products, we have books we sell, we also have these digital products, which are books that we sell, but they're digital, they're in the digital world, they don't exist unless there's code running out there to actually realize the value, to see the outcome. And that was like, oh, that's an interesting paradigm shift. And those books, if you don't have the code out there running, you can't read a book. And that's an ecosystem of things that have to deliver the book. They have to run the book on a device to see it. And if it's not all working and compatible, you can't read your book. You can still read these. So back at ServiceNow, just to give you a little bit of a background on my own experience, I have an enterprise architecture background. So I'm a product manager and I manage the CMDB and CSDM. But I know the application development space. My background is developing apps that I ship out or use within the IT organization. On the other side of the fence, I would say, on the DevOps side of the fence, you got services being managed. And historically, those are two different systems, two different teams, and people threw things over the wall, and the folks out there had to run them operationally. And in the middle is something called DevOps. Anybody heard of that? If you haven't, you're living under a rock. Yeah, but the thing is that DevOps even has created frameworks around managing these digital product concepts. And the way I describe to my kids, you know, this digital product is like the app portfolio and the service portfolio got married and had babies. And it's called a digital product. So rather than trying to make one win versus the other win, let's come up with a concept that basically supersedes both of them in a way that's product centric, and digital product makes sense. Okay, so that's kind of the thought pattern that came to this definition, which we went on a venture to create a definition and publish white papers, and now it's part of IT4IT. So these digital products are everywhere. I think I like this example because people never really heard of it. But my oven, when I built my house, came as a digital oven. It has an operating system. It connects to my Wi-Fi, connects to my watch. And it connects to my phone, so I actually could scan the barcode on my food. It beams that barcode to somewhere in the Whirlpool data center, which then programs my oven. And when the oven is done, it tells my watch, wherever I am in the house, that my food is done. So there's an ecosystem of different digital products that are working together to realize an outcome. And this is all around us, you know, and these dependencies, these outcomes are dependent on more and more of these products working together.
And what happens when the Whirlpool company discovers a CVE in one of their downstream software components that's part of your digital oven?
Well, the scream test, I might scream if they unplug that thing in the data center. What is this thing, you know, spitting out, you know, recipes from a barcode. So I wouldn't want to see that. And I don't plan on replacing my oven anytime soon. Okay, I want to keep that for 20 years. So Whirlpool better keep that server in their data center for 20 years, right, or more. And then I want it to be patched. And they did patch it. So this oven came and they updated it about 2 months ago with an air fryer mode. It didn't have that before. So the behavior of my oven changed, right, without me having to touch it. So they're everywhere if you look, and it's kind of interesting when you start thinking about the consequences. And so we did embark on a definition. There's a white paper we wrote. There was at least 84 revisions of this paper before we got it right and published. And I think, you know, from a simplicity perspective, a digital product runs code to deliver outcomes. That's the way you need to think about it. There's a lot of other stuff in the definition, and we've gone much further in the IT4IT space to kind of put some additional context around that. One of the key things are the two different life cycles that are there, which is creating the digital product and getting it out there to be used. And then there's the user experience. We call it the contract life cycle. If it's an oven, I expect it around for 20 years. My contract with Whirlpool is keep it running for 20 years. I don't want to get rid of it. But other digital products have different contracts. And what about my own product? My contract was with my peers down the hallway with a dependency on my product. You know, the contract that I have with them is really just a handshake, not much more than that. And whatever they can lobby to get their stuff done versus one of their peers.
Well, an insight from this discussion about zero trust architectures and supply chain security is actually what you want is down that stack, you want these contracts in place. You want explicit subscriptions between the different layers of that product so that you can trace how it works and do exactly the things we were hearing about earlier.
Yeah, and what we want to do is formalize some of these informal, undefined contracts because, I mean, I need to know who my customer is so I can make them successful and I understand my value and the outcomes I deliver. And that goes for these internal used digital products, the ones that you use from your partners and vendors, okay? And of course, your customers. It's not just for customers outside paying money. It's all these internal dynamics that need to be managed as a contract. So this is a different view. Some folks might recognize where this comes from, but this is a product instance, basically, when we defined it, has a couple of key elements, a contract, the way you interact with that product, which could be a mechanical lever in a car, it could be an API, it could be a human interface. And human interfaces could be APIs too, because you could do screen scraping and whatnot. And then it also consists of a system. So if you think about the instantiation of that digital product, there's compute and code running somewhere to make it work. So we call that a system in this diagram and in the model. And there's dependencies. So this is a recursive, this is a chain of dependencies between these digital products as they execute. Some of those with machine interfaces, some of those with human interfaces, or maybe even mechanical.
Yeah, so we're looking at the whole range of different kinds of consumers, which very much includes machine consumers. It includes other digital products consuming this digital product. And in TOGAF, you just went backwards.
I did. I want to explain one more thing on this one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, what I'm hearing from my customers is they want to understand those APIs and how they're used. They don't know who's on the other end calling my API. And when you change something, when it fails, or when there's something wrong with it that needs to be notifying those other ends, that needs to be managed better as well.
So if this colors are a bit washed out, but you've seen this picture before if you've paid attention to TOGAF in the last 10 years. And this is an example, a generic example in TOGAF of how some of the meta-model entities can be combined to describe an architecture. And we put this slide in here because if the topic is how do EA and digital products interact, this is part of the story. This is modeling a function within a function within a function that's part of a business service that's part of a function. This is the kind of modeling that you would need to do to model the digital products that we're talking about. TOGAF does this, it supports it, and it's important to be able to model these things correctly. And this again is, from a governance point of view, where's the touch point between the EA and the people who are building these products?
Right.
It's partly derivable from this diagram.
Yeah, and the contract is embedded in that arrow. What is the terms of the contract? You have to kind of elaborate on this to understand what that relationship happens to be. Is it an API? Is it a person? Is it an external company? So the question is, how will we work together? How will we take this IT4IT standard version 3, right, that's been written around this digital product concept, and TOGAF, which starts to address some of the issues, but not explicitly you can't explicitly see where they work together, right? And the question is, how do they, given the scenario of a digital product, what that is, and these different types of interactions with consumers of them?
So my takeaway as we worked on this presentation, one of them that's really important is that what we focus on when we're thinking in TOGAF ADM terms is we focus on finding out the motivation and who are the stakeholders and what are the right viewpoints and how do we manage the communication with the stakeholders. And all of that's important, but at the end of the day, what we're really interested in is business outcomes. And all this detail about the requirements and different views and different artifacts that we need to collect to create the views and so on. Actually, the real important thing here is what is the business outcome? And if you have kind of lost sight of that because it's not really emphasized in the way we teach people about TOGAF, then what you want to talk to developers about may seem kind of irrelevant.
Yeah.
But if you pick that up again and say, actually, what are we doing here? Why are they paying us all this money? Well, they're not paying it to you to draw beautiful models. They're paying you all that money because they want you to deliver better business outcomes.
Yeah.
And that's the touch point.
So what we've been working on is a new work stream to bring these together in a more precise way, I would say. And what we have also looked at, different types of digital products. It could be an application, a hardware device like a car or an oven, or a service, which is an interaction, pure interaction, but there's code running somewhere in that interaction. And we busted this up and we identified 4 distinct portfolios of digital product. When you think about digital transformation, there's 4 areas to transform, and they really start with the stuff that your customers obviously buy, the interactions you have with your customers, whether it's buying a pizza online and getting updates to say it's done and come pick me up, or if it's used by employees, making jobs easier in the company, HR, financial systems, whatnot. There's the shared stuff, my product. My product is shared, but I am a product manager, but in a lot of organizations, you don't do it. You don't treat your internal products like products. They're shared IT services or other things that are actually, lose that focus. And then, of course, factory automation. This is the thing we added since we actually published the paper.
Yes.
And it's actually, it came from a conversation I had with a customer. They said, you know what, Mark, we have 250 value streams that we built for these DevOps teams. It's a bit like DevOps gone wild. Every product team actually chose their own tools to implement their value stream for that product. And we want to make a change to them. We just want to insert one new step. But now we got to go to 250 teams that have not used any of the same stuff to insert that one new step. It's inefficient.
So another big takeaway for me as we talk through this is part of the important transformation that IT4IT represents as we move into a world of digital products is that IT is merging into OT. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people who grew up in an IT culture that was invented by accountants in 1963 who are comfortable with fuzzy edges find that transition difficult because OT doesn't give you as many soft landing places when you make mistakes.
Yeah. And there's kind of an interesting dynamic between these portfolios. Obviously, you're here for the upper right persona, which is your customer, but all these other things that are part of that story need to exist for as long as that customer's out there working with you, working with your product. And so we came up with 4 portfolio structures in order to make the decisions, rationalize them. These should be combined, this should be sold, we should acquire something else that does this for our employees or as a foundational piece of technology or digital product. And then those are, of course, delivered to those particular personas on the right. Now, the interesting thing about the value streams, right, for the digital products, the products that build products, so to speak, they have to be there as long as everything else is being consumed. You have to be able to support it. So in that manufacturing sense, right, whether you're making a car and pushing updates for the next 20 years or Boeing pushing updates to an airplane or just a service, you need all of the IT4IT stuff to be able to plan and get the feedback and then push those updates to whatever layer is necessary so your customer gets it.
So a key factor in the way that IT4IT describes the way that we should work building software is that the releases that we create should include all of the information that's needed in order to instantiate that thing now, not in 2 or 3 months, and all of the information that's needed to put the right monitors in place so that we can measure it in real time in the real world and not only measure performance, but measure SLAs, measure different aspects of how we understand this as a product that's alive. And that's why the contract and the model is called a subscription. I have a car that has 3 times as much code in it as Windows 10.
Yep.
I have a subscription to my Mercedes. I think I just bought a car, but I didn't really.
And I just read an article where BMW, I think it was, is charging to turn on features that are already built into your car.
Yep.
So they already have the hardware there, but they're just charging you more money to actually use them through the software updates.
And when you're working in that team building that stuff, if your design doesn't incorporate the fact that you are creating a subscription relationship with that end user out in the world, with me in my car, or with the team down the hall that's building something that you're supplying code to, then your design will be wrong and your release will be wrong and you will suffer. And all the things that are good about architecture can support helping people to do that the right way.
Yes. And that is our presentation. And thank you very much.